Niki and Jeremy. My name is Emma Jackson. I am a climate justice organizer with 350.org, which is an international climate justice organization committed to keeping fossil fuels in the ground. I'm based on Treaty 6 territory in Amiskwaci, Waskahigan, also known as Edmonton, Alberta. And my question for you is, what are your perspectives on a global Green New Deal? Why is it important and how do we win it? Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Francesca Hannan.
I'm Tiffany Balducci.
And I'm Rebecca Keetch. And we are organizers with Green Jobs Oshawa, a grassroots coalition of workers, community leaders, environmentalists, and labor activists. When General Motors announced their intention to end vehicle production in Oshawa, we advocated for placing the GM Oshawa plant under public ownership to repurpose it for socially beneficial manufacturing.
We commissioned a feasibility study that showed that a government-owned facility in Oshawa could create 13,000 jobs, build 150,000 electric vehicles in the first 5 years, and decrease CO2 emissions by 400,000 metric tons. The electric vehicles would be for the public sector, such as postal vehicles, ambulances, and more.
Once the COVID-19 crisis hit, we raised a demand for governments to order General Motors to produce PPE in Oshawa using the available space and laid off workers. After our campaign and pressure, the Canadian government and GM announced that 50 to 60 workers would be recalled to manufacture surgical masks. The pandemic proves it is possible for the manufacturing industry to shift gears quickly, but leaving this up to corporations alone won't do.
All across the world, people are rejecting capitalism's lie that we have to accept inequality and declining living standards. They understand that the system was constructed to protect the few, and they are demanding that it care for the many. Our question for Jeremy is, how important is it to place public ownership on the public agenda? And why is there power in public ownership?
So there you have it. Two questions. One more specifically on the Green New Deal, but the other connected to it is how can we use public ownership? And of course, you've been a great defender of nationalization to get at these goals of economic, social, and environmental justice.
Thanks, and brilliant questions, and thank you for the way that you put them. The way you put them as an education in itself. First of all, on public ownership of key industries and services is absolutely essential in the way forward, so that a progressive government then has the tools in which to deliver the economic strategy they want to deliver. I managed to persuade my party to support public ownership of the water system, of the rail system in its totality, and of the mail network, but also led and inspired by John McDonnell, we also developed a policy of supporting cooperatives, and when a business was going under, giving the workers first refusal on buying it out with government support to do so they would run the industry. But I was also very clear that this wasn't going to be a 1940s style of nationalization and public ownership, where essentially the government would take it over and would then appoint a board to run it, and it would be run on much the same lines it was run before, and the board would be just as remote. It would just be comprised of people that happen to be mates of the government rather than somebody else. What I wanted was a much more democratic form of public ownership, where you would be using the skill sets of the workers concerned. And I worked very closely with the Communication Workers Union on developing ownership of Royal Mail into People's Post service, which would not just deliver letters, would also take over the running of post offices, because they're a separate organisation in Britain, bizarrely, but would also develop the role of the postal worker within the community, because postal workers are an essential part of it. I also developed a policy of free access to the internet all over the country as a priority to cover the whole country, and I was condemned by the Daily Mail as bringing in broadband communism. I'm still struggling with the concept of what broadband communism is, but apparently it's what I proposed. It's interesting, the government itself is now demanding of the internet companies they provide universal access all over the country. The
we could
private
learn
sector
two
was
things.
never going to do it. It would only be because they're never going to go to some remote farm. I mean, the north of Manitoba, they're not going to go up into the Rockies and take something to some remote chalet or something. They're not going to do it in the Highlands of Scotland. They're only going to do it in the cities where it's easy. So it's got to be universal in the same way we demand a universal postal service. So public ownership is a very important part of it, and expanding it. We would also proposing a national investment bank with regional investment banks, which would develop industries within the ambit of the environment policy, but above all, the empowerment of the workforce and the skill levels of it. I mean, how many times do you go into a factory and you talk to people working on the machines, you talk to people who are doing the packing, you talk to people doing the delivering, they're bubbling with ideas. What turns up? Some bod from finance somewhere who says this factory is not worth anything, let's sell the site. What do they know? What do they know? What's their skill levels? So it is about empowering people. And if we're to win on the Green New Deal, and we are going to win on it, you've also got to recognize we've got to provide people with a degree of security. Now, I've been sort of feeling my way through this whole debate about universal basic income, minimum earnings guarantee, all these areas. Unless we offer to all communities some benefit of the green technologies we're bringing in, then we're not going to get much of a hearing. And so one idea we developed was that where we developed a wind farm on the coast, and Britain has lots of coast and lots of wind, so we were certainly up for that, and indeed they've grown a great deal. We said there has to be a special fund set aside, run by the local community for community improvements in the seaside towns, so they could see a wind farm being developed off the coast, they get the benefits from it. Fairly obvious stuff in many ways. So it is about that.